Yes, I'm Sergeant Dave Welch, working in the sexual assault and child abuse unit, like I said earlier. I've been doing that for 12 years. Part of our unit, besides investigating child abuse and sexual assaults with adults, is the sex offender detail and kidnapping detail. And now we have two detectives that their job is to check up on the addresses and verify addresses, make sure the offenders are living where they're at. So that's, these two guys do the whole city right now. We used to have 3 or 4, now we're down to 2. But they're doing a good job keeping it all under control. And I think they're able to answer a lot of questions that maybe they have, just about what they do and about sex offenders in general. We also have Sean McCrae, who's our administrative specialist, who probably through call our unit and ask it's called the sex offender detail. She's probably the first person you're going to talk to. And she may be able to answer your question. If not, then she'll pass you on to one of these detectives. Tony Stevenson, he already introduced himself. And then Tim Fields, who's going to be kind of the lead on the actual presentation here. So, Tim, what you want?
There's some flyers that they pass around. And Deb actually has some business cards.
And they're over here on the table.
The setup here is a little different, so we'll try and deal with this. As I said, my name is Tim Fields. I'm a detective with the Seattle Police Department Sex and Kidnapping Unit. I've been on the department for a little over 27 years. I worked 5 years in the investigation side, the sexual assault unit, where we investigated crimes against adults and of children. And then in 2002, I moved over to the sex offender detail, where we monitor the sex offenders and the kidnapping offenders. And pretty much in that role, what Detective Stevens and myself do is we go out to the community and we verify that the offenders are actually living at their address. You'll see in the presentation we'll go into more detail, but pretty much if they're not living there, what we do is we do a case up against them, failure to register, and then there's a warrant issued for them, and then they're arrested by the local patrol officers. Okay, so everybody thinks they know what sex offenders look like. Who in here thinks they know what sex offenders look like? A lot of times you're walking down the street saying, that's a sex offender, that's just a bad guy. Not you, man. You know, but really we don't know what sex offenders look like, because sex offenders come in all shapes and forms, different race, they come in different sex. We have a lot of female sex offenders, not just men, but it's primarily men, but we do have female sex offenders. So what I want to do is just go through real quick. If you have a pen and a piece of paper, if you just kind of do a little tally here, see how many of these you can get right. The question here says, can you pick out sex offenders? Okay, so we're just going to go real quick and see how many you can get right. So, well, all these, if you dim the front lights, can we do that? Or?
Yeah. 5 can you do
Just the slider on the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you think he's a sex offender, just would mark a line or something, and we'll make a tally later. How about this guy right here? How about this young lady? Huh? No idea, no idea. What about him? What about this guy? Looks like he could be somebody's grandfather, huh? What about him? It looks like he could be somebody's grandfather. Well-dressed, tie, suit. What about this guy right here? What about him? What about him? And last but not least, what about her? We cannot pick out sex offenders. Like I said, sex offenders come in all shapes, sizes, race, sex. We can't pick them out. So let's just go back and let's see how many you got right. Show of hands, how many say he's a sex offender? We have 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. He is a registered sex offender. He lives in the south end of Seattle. What about him? Probably every hand in here should have went up. Because I believe this meeting was actually created because of this individual here that actually moved into some of your communities. This here is Nicholas Beavers. Nicholas Beavers is a young male in his 20s. And a lot of you have reason to worry. He is a level 3 sex offender. Everybody on here is going to be a level 3, but there's one on here that's out of compliance. And you'll find out later why she is on there. So yeah, his crime was actually he was working at a daycare, and he actually offended against a 3 and a 4-year-old child. Okay, but he's level 3, he's very high risk, and so the reason he's level 3 is because of his crimes, and then also because he was in a position of trust. He was like assisting a teacher or the daycare teacher. So automatically he's in a position of authority and trust, and so automatically he's going to be a level 2 just off the bat. But he became a level 3 because of other situations. So he's somebody we want to be concerned about. But he's living in some of your neighborhoods. I believe it's I don't know what neighborhood it is, but what do you call your neighborhood? North Avenue. Yes. And I actually met with him a little while ago, so he is in fact living there. He's actually living there with some individuals. And one thing you might have noticed on the website, he didn't actually give his address, because when we put the bulletins out, it only has the 100 blocks. So it's like the 2400 block of Delridge Way Southwest. And that's for his or her protection, is what it is. Yes, question?
I recently seen him and he's changed his appearance.
Yeah. His hair different or? Blue. Okay. But his face doesn't look any different. You still recognize it. Okay. One thing I'm going to ask that I do have a lot of information. So if you maybe hold the questions till the end, that would be great. But if there is something that you just pressing, go ahead and just raise your hand and I will answer. But I just don't want to get flooded with a whole bunch of questions because there is a lot of information. I know we only have a little bit of time. Okay? What about this girl? She is a registered sex offender. She's a level 3 sex offender. Her crime, real quickly, was she was a little younger. She was in the Georgetown area knocking on doors selling newspapers. And we know that there's a lot of kids that are coming around selling newspapers. A lot of them are legit, but hers wasn't. And the young lady that answered the door, she asked, would you like to buy some newspapers? She said no. And so the young lady said, well, can I use your telephone? I need to call my mom. So she went into the house, she picked up the phone, and then she attacked the homeowner. And she's a sex offender, so pretty much what she did is she sexually assaulted the lady. Okay? So we do have female sex offenders. She is level 3 right now. She's incarcerated. I did a failure to register as a sex offender case on her because she moved from her residence and she did not change her address with the King County Sheriff's Office. So she is in prison now. Is that right, Tony? Yes. Bridget? This young man here, he is a registered sex offender. This older man here, he is a registered sex offender. He actually was living here in the West Seattle area. His name is Robert Dehon. Robert Dehon actually ran a construction company. What he would do is he would actually hire kids out of school. So they were of age. But what he would do is he would hire them and then he would sexually assault them. And what he would do also is, he used to be on DLC, he's off. But what he would do is he would hire individuals from DLC that were on supervision that couldn't get jobs. They would come work for him and he didn't want to pay them. So then he would blackmail them and he would say, okay, I'll give you your pay, but you have to do for me. So you can let your mind wander. That's what he would do. So he would blackmail and a lot of people. This young man right here, is he a sex offender or is he not?
Yes, he is.
How many think he is? How many think he's not? He is a sex offender. This is Mr. Kite. He's a level 3 sex offender. His crime of choice, he's a voyeur. But for you women, you need to watch out. His first crime was he was at some type of a conference. And what he did is he was looking at the reader board. You know, with him being old, we want to help the old. the elderly. So she's really looking at the reader board, and this young lady walks up and says, "Excuse me, I can't see, my cataracts are acting up. Could you read the board? I'm looking for Dr. So-and-so." And so while she's looking, he's down on the floor looking up her skirt. Okay, so I think she kicked him, attacked him, he was arrested, he was convicted. Well, he did this again too. He just continues. He's a sick man, but he's very smooth, he's a smooth talker. As a matter of fact, he just moved out of my area, out of the south end of Seattle. He just moved into Detective Stevenson area, so Detective Stevenson's going to have to deal with him. I guess I should let you know also that West Seattle is my area. I just inherited from Detective Stevenson because we lost one of the detectives. So I took over West Seattle. I've been here 2 months, and I also have the south end of Seattle, and I have the downtown area. Detective Stevenson has the entire north end, and he has also the entire East Precinct area, which is Capitol Hill and East Central District, up around Garfield. I believe this is going to be the last guy here. Okay, no, there's 2 more. What about him? He is a sex offender. Since I've been monitoring him, he lives in the south end of Seattle, I've had no problems with him, but he is a sex offender, he's level 3. This guy right here, he's a level 3 sex offender, he's a young man. His first crime occurred when he was a juvenile. He went to juvie, did his time, and he got out, and he was doing okay for a little while. Then he reoffended. And when I read the report, I was like, man. I said, you know, if the girl that he offended again was my daughter or my niece, he would have been hurt. You know, but what he did to her was pretty traumatic. You know, so he is in jail. He went back and did his time. He's back out. But now he's back in King County for a violation with the Department of Corrections because he had a bad QA or he did something he wasn't supposed to. So he's back in jail, but he's a bad guy. So he already has two strikes against him. This guy right here, what do you think? He is a sex offender. This is Mr. Prasad. He lives down in the south end of Seattle. He actually was a church leader. He was like a youth leader, and he offended against some of the kids within the church. This young lady right here, she is a sex offender, but she's not a level 2, nor is she a level 3. She's a level 1 sex offender. But she's out of compliance with the sex offender registration law, so she is on the websites. And so at the end, you'll see where you can go to the different websites. We don't have the wireless in here, so we can't go to the websites and kind of go through it, but it's pretty self-explanatory. You can go to WASPIC, and it'll pretty much lead you right through it. WASPIC, waspc.org. And you go there, and on the right side, you're going to see registered sex offenders. You click on that, then right up top, it's going to say, my part, it's going to say sex offender search up top. On the right side, it'll say registered sex offenders. You click on that, then you're going to see a map. You put the mouse on King County, and then you click on that, and it's going to take you right to the King County Sheriff's website. And then you can put an offender's name in there, or you can actually put your address in there, and it will tell you the sex offenders that live within your neighborhood. You can go 2 miles, 5 miles, 6 miles, whatever you want. Okay, so but she is a sex offender, but she's out of compliance with the sex offender registration law. And normally, a level 1 sex offender will not be on the website. Level 1 sex offenders you don't hear about because they are protected by law. So the only ones you know about are your level 2 sex offenders and your level 3, because the level 2 is the moderate risk and level 3 are the high risk to reoffend. She's a low risk to reoffend. So she's somewhat protected by law. But there is a way you can find out about level 1 sex offenders. We'll get to that a little bit later. Okay. I usually do that last, so I'm kind of starting over here. I figured I would do it a little different today. So here's pretty much everybody in our unit. And, what's that? Sure, go ahead. Well, that would actually be King County Sheriff's.
I think it's Jessica Santos.
Santos is fine.
Well, she's declined. I work
It
in the
is.
sheriff's office.
Okay.
I used to work in the RSO,
Okay.
and I think it's
What's your
Jessica
name?
Santos.
Ron Jones, okay. Yeah.
You know you don't.
Yeah.
I think it's Jessica Santos.
Okay. She got married?
She got divorced.
Oh, okay. All right.
You can just call the RSO unit at the sheriff's office.
Yeah, their number is-
Which detective works.
Their number is 206-2121 is going to be the administrative assistant Dallas Ducey. But you can call that number and you'll get someone there and they'll get something out. Pretty much sex offender, anyone that was convicted of a sex offense, they have to register as a sex offender. If they were convicted of kidnapping in the first degree, kidnapping in the second degree, or unlawful imprisonment, or luring, they have to register as a sex offender. With the kidnapping, it has to be a minor, under the age of 16. Okay, and so they have to register as a kidnapper and as a sex offender. A lot of times with the kidnappers, what we're finding, the ones that I've run into, in fact, I know there was one who was living up in West Seattle years ago. I'm not sure where he's at right now, but he had stole a car, and there was a baby in the back seat. And so because he stole the car and there was a baby in there, they charged him with kidnapping because the child did not belong to him. And so he had to register as a kidnapper. Now, he hated that because he's like, man, I'm not a sex offender, I'm not a kidnapper. I just stole a car. I'm just a thief. Well, he stole a car with a baby, and so he had to register, because they charged him with kidnapping. And believe me, Tex Stevens can tell you, kidnappers don't like being called sex offenders. They will tell you right off the bat, I'm not a sex offender. I'm a kidnapper. They don't want to be classified as a sex offender because everybody hates sex offenders. Okay, just tell you a little bit of history of how the law came into effect. The first one was Diane Balasotis. September 26, 1988, she left work and she was reported missing. They did an extensive search, and then they finally found her partially clothed body October 3, 1988. The young man that was responsible was Gene Kane. On October 8, 1988, he was arrested. And where he was residing at the Reynolds Work Release, downtown Seattle. And is everybody familiar with what work release is? Okay, for those that are, pretty much what work release is once you get out of prison, or if you go to King County Jail and you have time that you need to do, they'll send you to work release. And you go there, you stay there during the day, during the night, but you go out and work during the day, so they call it Reynolds Work Release. Well, he was staying at Reynolds Work Release. And so when she got off work, right in the downtown area, he pretty much grabbed her and he pretty much killed her and sexually assaulted her. So that's how it got started. The next one was, a lot of you might have heard of this one, it's Poma, 7-year-old boy who was abducted while riding his bike. He was raped, choked, and sexually mutilated. Earl Schreiner, you've heard the name before. He was responsible for that. He had a lengthy criminal history for sexual conviction and for sex convictions. He was arrested and put in jail. And then the other one I want to tell you about is Lee Joseph Isaac. And you've heard the name Wesley Allen Dodd. Okay. Pretty much what he did is on Sunday, October 29, 1989, he kidnapped this kid in Portland, Oregon, took him to Vancouver, Washington, and he sexually assaulted him and sexually mutilated him. The kid was found hung, on October of 1989. Okay. Wesley Allen Dodd was a very sick guy. Even when he was in prison, he had fantasies, and there was a lot of psychological things about him that, we knew that something was going to happen, but his time was up and he had to release him. There was no sex offender law in place at that time, so there was no community notification, so nobody knew about it. Okay, so when they passed the law, it was great. Pretty much what happened is because of those incidents, they created a task force to try and get some type of protection for the community and for the kids. There were legislative hearings, and some of the concerns was from the ACLU, it was unconstitutional, there was going to be additional punishment on the offenders or the suspect. Real estate agents were concerned that it was going to hurt business. The citizens, they were overwhelmingly in favor of it because of protection for their children. Law enforcement, the line officers, they were in favor, 100%. The chiefs and the sheriffs, they were in favor of it, but they were concerned about the vigilantism that may occur with these sex offenders, the increased workload for detectives, officers, and additional resources are going to be needed. You see that we used to have 4 detectives, now we're down to 2, handling the entire city. So that was one of their biggest concerns. So then what happened was they created the tennis shoe brigade. And what they did is they gathered up a whole bunch of tennis shoes, kids' tennis shoes, and they took it down to Olympia and they put them on the stairs of Olympia. Okay, just kind of showed that they're serious about this. The Community Protection Act of 1990 passed on February 28th of 1990, and it was unanimous. It was a tool for law enforcement to use to track sex offenders, to know where they're living at, and put them back in jail if they violate. It was a three-pronged. It was registration, 1. It was community notification, 2. And civil commitment, 3. Washington was the first state to have registration, community notification, and a civil commitment. Registration pretty much is that if you commit a sex crime or kidnapping crime, you have to register as a sex offender or kidnapper. So that's the registration portion. You'll see later you have 3 days once you're released from prison to register as a sex offender or you're in violation. The next portion was the community notification. The community notification, it was relevant and necessary because everybody wants to know where the sex offender is living at. Even though we're not giving out the exact addresses, but if you live in the 2400 block of Dale Ridge Way South, you know your community. You know who lives within that block. So when you see a bulletin come out with this guy's picture on it, you say, well, that's that guy who lives over there. So now you just keep watching to see him coming out of the house. You know, so you in that block, in that neighborhood, you know where that sex offender lives. But it's the people on the outer areas that don't know. They don't need to. Okay, they don't need to know the address. But you that live in that block, you know that address because you know who lives in your neighborhood. Level 1 sex offenders, like I was saying, level 1 was just law enforcement notification. So we knew where the level 1 sex offenders were living at, but the community didn't. The way the community could find out is upon request. So a good example of that, and you'll see this a little bit later, is the example I always use. Let's say, for instance, that you have a young daughter, she's about 4 years old, and she goes out and plays in the front yard. And every time she goes out in the front yard to play, the neighbor comes out there, and he sits on the porch, and he's just watching your daughter play. But you know, that just makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck. You're like, what's wrong with this guy? And so, you know his name is John Doe, and he lives right next to you, so you know his address. So what you can do is you can call our office. You can talk to Detective Stevenson, myself, or Michelle McRae, our administrative assistant. And one of us will answer your questions. If you know his name, you know where he's living at, and you can give me some specific reasons why it is that you want to know if he's a sex offender or not, I will tell you if he's a level 1 sex offender. But if you just call up and say, hey, Detective Fields, I was in your class, you know, and there's this guy that lives next door to me, his name is John Doe. Is he a sex offender? I'm sorry, I can't tell you that. Because what you're doing is you're fishing. You're fishing, and we can't do that, because we have to protect ourselves as liability. Yes?
What about a license plate?
What's that?
What about a license plate?
No.
No, we didn't. You saw a car with a license plate.
Well, we'll do that. We'll take the information, but we're not gonna run it and tell you if you're a sex offender, if he's a sex offender. We'll run it, and you tell me the activity that he was doing or he was involved in, and we'll make a FIR, which is a field investigative report, or we'll write a report, or we'll just make a note of it. So when we're back in the area, we'll watch that for that. But no, we won't tell you if he's a sex offender or not. But that's good information. That's suspicious information that we're always looking for. And we have tons of examples of things like that. And actually, a lot of times it turns into a big case. You know, we have to just call it in and give us the information. Okay. So level 1 is if you know the guy's name and you have a specific reason, I need to know. We'll tell you if he's a sex offender or not. But we're not going to go on a fishing expedition. Your level 2 and your level 3 is very proactive to the community. Level 2 and level 3 are on the internet. Back here when the law was created, it was all bulletins being sent out to the community. So your level 2 offender bulletins were being sent to daycares, people within that community. So if this is an entire block, you all would get copies of that bulletin. But we're not going to send it to everybody, just the ones in the immediate area. But since the internet, now level 2 and level 3s are all on the internet. You can go to waspic.org, you can go to kingcounty.gov, their website. But like I said, when you go to waspic.org, it'll take you right to the King County website. So that's the one I always use, is that one there. Pretty much the risk levels. When the law was first created, the risk levels were pretty much given by the local law enforcement agency. What we would do is we would get their file information, see what their crime was, and we would score them out. Score them out as a level 1, low risk, level 2, a moderate risk, or level 3, high risk. So again, as time went on, what they did is they changed the process. Now what happens is, if an individual is released, before he or she is released from prison, the end of sentence in the sentence review committee actually scores the offender out. And the committee consists of law enforcement officers, Department of Corrections officers. We have a doctor from Western State that sits on it. There's also counselors, like from the Department of Social Services, that sit on these groups. And they score them out before they're released. And then they'll score out 1, 2, and 3. If they're level 3, there's a notification that's actually coming to the law enforcement agencies informing us that he or she is being released to our community. Okay. And the other thing is let's say, for instance, that John Doe committed a sex crime, communicated with a minor, and the judge sentenced him to, let's say, 8 months in jail. So because it's only 8 months in jail, he's going to stay in the King County jail. So when he's released from the King County jail, the Innocence Review Committee is not going to, they're not going to score him out because he's not in prison. So what happens is when he or she is released, it's the responsibility of that local law enforcement agency that he resides at to score him out as level 1, 2, and 3. So you may see, well, we'll see it, you may never see it. Sometimes we'll see him in paperwork where it says he's not rated. And that just means that we have not got to him yet and he hasn't been rated. But what we consider, if an individual has not been rated, we consider them a low risk. And the reason a lot of times they haven't been rated is because it's their first crime. They didn't do prison time, they just did jail time. And so it's not a big issue right now. Now, if they had a couple convictions, we would jump on it right away. Okay, so the civil commitment portion of it is pretty much of that 3-prong. The civil commitment is that a sex offender had been convicted of a sex offense. They suffered from a mental abnormality, and they had a mental abnormality, personal disorder, and they also predisposed to likely to engage in another sex offense. Okay, so what happens before they're released from prison, that same group, the Innocence Review Committee, they will score him out, and they will also decide if he or she fits the criteria to be civilly committed. And if they fit that criteria, they'll be sent over to another group. And then they will review it again, and then they will put them up for civil commitment. And what happens is once they're released from prison, they won't leave prison. They go to the Civil Commitment Center, and they wait for their time to go to court to see if they're going to be found guilty and stay at the Civil Commitment Center. And there's a lot of individuals that actually have been placed at the Civil Commitment Center, but then once they go to trial, they're found not guilty or find that they don't have a mental abnormality, or a personal disorder, and so they're released to the community. And we've had that happen several times. Or what will happen is the psychologist will review their file and see if they don't meet the criteria and they're released. And I know a guy right now, he's level 3 sex offender. His name is Clarence Dion Walls. Clarence Dion Walls is he's a bad guy. None of the detectives that work in the unit want him on their list. Matter of fact, one detective up north, Detective Gordon, that used to be in our unit, he actually ran Dion out of the North End, legally, but he ran him out. Well, Dion comes down the south end of Seattle because that was the first place he went to when he was released from prison, to my area. So I have the privilege of checking on Dion Walls every 3 months to make sure he's living there. He lives with his grandmother. But Dion has problems, he has issues. He went in jail when he was 13 years old. When he turned 18, they went through the process and they civilly committed him. Put him over into the civil commitment portion to be civilly committed. Well, the psychologist looked at his case and said this guy doesn't fit the criteria. So he was released to the community. Now, all of the DOC workers that were working with him, they also, Dion's going back to prison. He's a bad guy. Dion hasn't gone back yet, but he is a bad guy. He just hasn't gotten caught. But, yeah, question?
Yeah, actually, too. Is he court ordered to live with his grandmother?
No.
Okay. So if she were, I'm just thinking, if she were to pass away, he's on his own.
Actually, I'm dealing with that right now.
Okay.
When Dion was in prison, his grandmother and his grandfather were the only ones that came to see him. So that was pretty much his lifeline right there. So when he was released, he went back to grandma, and she's up in age. And she actually she called me and said, Detective Fields, can I meet with you? I said, sure, no problem. So we met in one of my favorite places to drink coffee and talk and socialize. And she told me what the issue was. She is up in age, she has illnesses, and she's concerned about him. And he's on some type of assistance where she pays for his bills and everything. Well, he can't pay anything. And so she's concerned that what's going to happen to him when she passes. So actually what I did is I actually referred her to have him contact Seattle Mental or some other organization that maybe could help him out. Because if not, what's going to happen to him, he is going to be back in prison because he can't survive on his own. You know, and some would say, well, hey, so what? You know, but like I did, like I told, I referred him to those agencies and hopefully they're able to help him out so he can succeed. Like I said, he's been out for probably about 5 years and he hasn't gone back to prison yet. I think he went to jail for something, false report that somebody made on him. But I know he's a bad guy and I know he's out there doing crazy things, but he's not doing anything that he's reoffending. You know, so hopefully his grandma doesn't pass anytime soon before they get something in place. But yeah, but if she does and he doesn't, he's going to be a problem. Pretty much the law was tailored to help the community protect itself from sexual predators under the guidance of law enforcement. It wasn't to punish them any more than what they've already been punished. Okay, one thing a lot of sex offenders say is, man, this is just additional punishment. I've done my time. Okay, yeah, you have. But the community needs to be safe. And once you explain to them, they understand it to a point, but they still say, I shouldn't have to register. Then they'll say, well, how come murderers don't have to register? They murder people and their victims are dead. You know, so it's pretty much to help law enforcement. It's not additional punishment. And one thing that we feel is that the public has a right to know where these individuals are living at least the area that they're living in, to protect the children and protect the children that live around them.
So can I ask you a question? How do you
Sure.
handle events like Halloween? I just recently had a sex offender, level 3, move in right next door to me. I have 2 kids, wife, and our old neighbors used to give out the big candy bars, and kids used to run like a flock of seagulls to get those bars. Is he allowed or intended allowed to pass out candy on Halloween? And what are my rights to the people that I know in my community to help them be aware of it?
If, 2 prongs here. If he's on supervision, his DLC supervisor won't allow him to.
Okay.
They will say, you cannot pass out any candy. I don't want you outside. And if I hear that you're outside, if I get any phone calls, you're going to be violated. So if they're on supervision with the Department of Corrections, they're going to be taken care of. If they're not on supervision, there's nothing you can do. Pretty much they're free to do whatever they want because there's nothing holding them. There's no law saying that they can't pass out candy on Halloween. There's no law saying that they can't do anything when it comes to Halloween. So what you need to do, if you know that sex offender lives next door to you, you just need to be watchful. Okay, and if the kids are out walking around trick-or-treating and he's out there walking also, well, maybe you should go out there and walk behind him or walk with him. Maybe come out with your video camera. Hey, how's it going?
So that's not considered harassing him?
You know, it's kind of 50-50. It's kind of hard to say. You know, that's depends on the individual. If he's the sex offender, he say, yeah, man, he's harassing you. You don't think it's harassment because you think you're protecting the community. You know, you're just making sure that he doesn't do anything. Well, let's just turn it around. Let's say, okay, you're walking behind him, you see him approach a child, then you bring your camera. You're not harassing, you're protecting. Okay? So it kind of depends how you handle that, how you do it. Now, if I was a sex offender and you're walking behind me, you're videotaping every move that I make, yes, I'm going to think you're harassing me. And now Halloween, I can see it. But now if you're doing this every day, I'm probably going to sue you. I might win. So it depends how you go about that. You know, we have to use common sense in everything that we do, or we can all be sued. You know, the good example is just say, for instance, you were a sex offender and you're just walking to the store, but I'm walking behind your videotape. You're going to say I'm harassing you, you're probably going to beat me up. You're going to want to do something to me because I'm harassing you and I'm not letting you be free in the community and have fun or do whatever. And the main thing you would say, well, excuse me, sir, I did my time. Yeah, I'm a sex offender, but I can go to the store. I can go to the park. I can do this. I can do that. So yeah, you would say I'm harassing. See, it's just use common sense. That's all. So.
One of the quick ones, up in the West Seattle area, a friend of mine, told me I was coming down here, he was telling me, he saw signs on, like, telephone poles up in the California district with that gentleman up there saying, if you see this man, blah, 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 and a bunch of them have been torn down.
They're all torn down.
He's gave her other people to tear them down, but people would put them up. Is that considered a violation of his rights? Is it, I kind of figured, it sounded like where you were going, that would be.
Yes, one thing you'll find is when you print someone's bulletin out from the website, that's for your use. You can pass it to friends, neighbors, give it to them, no problem. But when you go to post it on bulletin boards and different locations, that's when you step over the line. Because you are harassing them then, because they have a right to be free within the community, because they've done their time. The notification's out there so you know where they're living at or the area that they're living at. But we don't need to put extra pressure on them. I'm going to get a little bit later on vigilantism. And there's a lot of situations that actually have occurred because community members didn't want sex offenders living within their neighborhood. And that's something that the legislature is not going to tolerate. And if we do find that someone is, doing that, they could be charged. Yeah.
We have all probably got a group of friends that we know. And if we know this large group, like our Block Watch group, it's perfectly legal for you to send out emails to all of these people and say, this guy is a level 3 sex offender, he lives at this address, we have a holiday coming up where children may be going to his door.
Absolutely.
We have a responsibility to protect those children.
You're right. I totally agree. And the law and the legislature totally agree also. It's just when we go post it on bulletin boards and on poles and in front of his house, that's what we're kind of crossing.
Now we're outside the sphere of our group. We're outside that group that we know.
Yeah.
And that can be considered harassment.
And the other thing is too, is the bulletins that are created, it's against the law for us to, well I say all, us, I'm talking about the community, to alter that bulletin in any way. Pretty much it needs to stay in the form that it is. I had a situation out in the south end of Seattle with a level 2 sex offender. His name is Jerome Jackson. He's now in Tony's area. And he had an ex-girlfriend. Well, the ex-girlfriend, well, I can't say that it was the ex-girlfriend, but he believes it was the ex-girlfriend. Somebody made up some bulletins with his picture on it and put them on the streets, on his street. Just all over the ground for kids to see that are walking to school. Put them on some of the poles. Well, now, if we could have proved who did it, they would be looking at a charge. But we couldn't prove who did it. He believes it's his ex-girlfriend, but he had no proof. But whoever it was, they did alter that bulletin and put it out there. So. But no, what you're doing is absolutely good. That's correct. That's what you should do. And that's what community members should do, is inform one another what the sex offenders are living at. Yes.
Do they tell the schools? Because whoever did those bulletins, they put it all by the school and high school.
Yeah, the schools.
I saw them.
The schools in Seattle are informed. All the schools are informed. I believe the King County Sheriff actually handles that. Wanda used to work
I
for
used to do the
Seattle.
school notification.
So yeah, the schools are aware of it. If they're not aware, usually what they'll do is they'll contact us.
Yeah.
I'm going to say something about that, though,
Right.
too, and unless it's changed, to be honest with you, I've worked in that unit for 2 years. We rely on self-reporting as far as for them to fill out the registration form and say, I attend this school. So.
It's interesting she brings that up, and that is something that the sex offenders have to do if they're going to school. They have to put on the registration form that they're attending a certain school. It's interesting that comes up again. I'm not going to say the offender, who it is, but I got a call just yesterday that a level 3 sex offender was attending a school up off Broadway. And they called King County, find out if this individual had disclosed the school location that he's attending. King County said no. And they're like, well, what can we do? Well, King County, of course, passed the buck. Well, that's Seattle Police responsibility. Contact them. So they called Michelle McRae, and Michelle asked me if I wanted to talk to the director of the school. So I talked to the director, I explained to the director what the law is, and that the individual had not put the information on the registration form. So he said, well, I'm going to be dismissing him from the school. And I said, well, you know, that's your business, that's between you and your legal department, that has nothing to do with us. And he said, well, he's supposed to disclose that information, he didn't disclose it to us. And I told him, I said, well, when you talk with him, tell him to give me a call, because he needs to make sure he discloses his school next time and his job and so forth. So he lost his job. But you know, there's a karma, you know, what goes around comes around. And what happened was that same offender, there was another offender attending that same school. Well, that other offender had did something that made a person feel uncomfortable. And then the offender that I was just talking about, him and a couple other guys went to the director and said, he's a registered sex offender. He shouldn't be here. That guy got kicked out of school. Well, a couple of weeks later, now this guy's getting kicked out because he didn't give up the information that he's attending a certain school. So, you know, what goes around comes around. You know, yeah.
Let me know if you want to move on. So and you may address this, but with this particular person, the young guy that's kind of moved into our neighborhood, one thing that strikes me as odd is the proximity to all the preschools and daycares that are around, because there's a lot in that concentrated area. And considering his crime, I'm curious, are there any laws that protects him from moving into proximity? Whoa, very intimidated by him. On right there.
So right there.
Right.
Law enforcement has no say where offenders live as long as it doesn't violate their J&S. J&S is their judgment and sentence. Okay? The next question is, can sex offenders live next door to daycares? If you think they can, just raise your hand.
Well, clearly they can.
Okay. Can sex offenders live next door to schools? Yes, they can. There's no law that says they cannot live next door to daycares. There's no law that says they can't live next door to schools. There's a misconception out there that sex offenders cannot live within 1,000 feet of schools or daycares. That's not a law.
How do we get on the ballot?
Good point.
Talk to your senators, your legislators. Pretty much the only grace that we have is we hope and pray that they're on supervision with DOC. If they're on supervision with DOC, DOC will not allow them to live next door to daycares or near schools. And a good example of that is, it would have been a little bit later. A good example is that I received a phone call about 2 years ago from a neighbor. And you'll hear me say this later on. That the community, you guys are the eyes and ears of the department. Okay? We need your help, we need your assistance in everything that we do, because you live in that community. And lady across the street. I'm getting old, you know. Lady across the street from the sex offender, he was level 3 sex offender. And she called the office, or she sent an anonymous tip. Said that there's a registered sex offender living in such and such address, there's a daycare right next door. And so, I don't know, did you hear that? And so, I said, okay, this was probably about 4 years ago or so. And so what I did is I looked at it, I said, well, I verified the guy there, I know he's there. And so I said, well, I'll go out and I'll check. I go out to the house right next door, knock on the door, lady comes to the door. Sure enough, there's a daycare there. But there's no license signed in front. So when I went out to verify, I didn't know there was a daycare there. So I'm talking with the daycare provider. She says, well, detective, there's another daycare just 4 houses down. I said, really? So I go 4 houses down, I talk to the lady there. Sure enough, there's a daycare there. Toys all in the backyard, everything, but there's no sign out there saying a licensed daycare. So I go back to the office, we check it out. Sure enough, they're licensed daycares. So I called DOC and I informed them that you have a level 3 sex offender living right next door to a daycare, right next door, and then 4 houses down, there's 4 more. 4 houses down, there's another daycare. And what they did is they contacted the offender and they made him move out. But guess where he moved to? West Seattle. But at that time, I was South End, so I didn't care if they moved over here. He was out of my area. No, but he moved over here, but the main thing is that if he's on supervision, DOC will move him because they don't want the liability that if he does reoffend against one of those kids, then it's on him. So that's the only saving grace that we have if they're on supervision with the Department of Corrections. Okay, yes.
So is there any list that is checked against where they're living to a licensed daycare? Because I know there are licensed daycares that specifically don't put signage out in front
Just for that reason.
to protect the daycare.
Are you saying there's a law that they have to?
Well, no, I'm just saying, is there something that law enforcement has or that people can check, like that you can check against the licensed daycare listing to say that address is next to a daycare that the Department of Corrections has?
There may be something out there that you use, but there's nothing I know.
I think it would be more DSHS that would be in control of a list like that, not law
Yeah,
enforcement.
yes,
And they don't always communicate their information.
Right.
actually, it's the Department of Early Education, from early learning or now that keeps the list of licensed daycare in the state, and they have an Excel spreadsheet you can download, but they don't sort it down.
Because I just want to run away with that there's no signage because they're trying to protect the kids there from.
And you have to know that the offender is supervised too.
Yeah, so it's hard.
And all these
There's
DOC people
there.
that supervise sex offenders just got laid off notices yesterday.
Well,
Just so you know.
And hopefully the budget passes because what they've been saying, if it doesn't pass, they won't be monitoring systems. So hopefully it passes. You got a question on you?
Yeah, bulletin that you see on the internet, you can see on there whether they're supervised or not, right? Or they're all supervised or.
I'm not sure if that how updated that is.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's updated. Because sometimes defenders that I check on, sometimes they will get off supervision and we don't know it. So usually what I do is when I go out and I talk to them, I'll say, oh, so who's your CCO when you're off supervision? And they'll tell me, what I'll do is I'll put it in our database that so-and-so will be off supervision in 2 months, or on such and such date. So I wouldn't go off of that because it might not be correct. I don't know if Offender Watch or if the King County Sheriff's actually keeps that updated. Do you know if they do that one?
A couple years ago, the county that used to put in the probation and parole stipulations, Snow County was doing that pretty well, but then everyone kind of stopped because DOC, they can have a meeting with these guys and they can change the conditions just by agreement, and then they don't notify the sheriff's office, they don't tell anyone, so we wouldn't know. And so there's kind of not a good communication.
So probably-
with DOC.
So probably the best thing is if there is an offender that you want to know if he's on supervision, you can actually call us and we can actually run his name and look it up and we can tell you if he's on supervision or not.
One more quick thing I wanted to mention outside of has to do with all of this, but so that there's a number of sex offenders that live in my neighborhood, and it just popped up in the last month. And I looked up their information, and I can't tell by the wording if it's a statutory rape type case or if it's a case of like predatory, because they seem like they're young. They committed their crimes, like 16 or whatever. Is there a distinction in the way that things are worded, like?
The way it used to be is it would be statutory rape. The way
It
it's
would
worded
say
now,
that.
it would say statutory rape. The way it's worded now is rape of a child in the first degree, rape of a child second degree, child molestation first, second degree. So it would be rape of a child. That would mean it was a statutory rape situation. If it's a rape, straight up rape, that's going to be an adult on an adult. Or it's going to be, let's just say it's rape in the third degree. It could also be a juvenile on a juvenile.
But if it's like a statutory rape type case, 16-year-old, 13-year-old, however that works, that's usually not going to be a level 2 or a level 3, right?
Not automatically, no.
Okay.
No. And we'll get to that a little bit later.
Sorry.
But no, not automatically. A lot of people think because he was found guilty of rape of a child in the first degree, he should be a level 3 sex offender. No. Or he was found guilty of rape in the first degree. He should be a level 3. No, not always. There's other factors that actually go into that. Go ahead.
I'm wondering, like, I'm seeing these, is this a case where maybe it wasn't a predatory, like, they looked that they were, you know, the statutory, that each did, so I'm trying to gauge, there's like 3 that moved in, and I'm trying to gauge.
Where do you live in?
White Center.
White Center, okay. See, I don't know, in the area that I work in, I usually know the assessment by addresses, you know, but I'm not familiar with White Center. Pretty much we're stopping at Roxbury, Tony? Right at Roxbury. And so I don't know the other side. Matter of fact, I know there was one guy that just moved in over in White Center that used to live in my area, and I know he moved over, but I can't remember what level it is. I can't remember what his name is. You know, but yeah, you need to get over to King County Sheriff's Detective. They'll work with you.
But also, isn't there a link on the sheriff's website, isn't the offense a link where you can click on it, it will explain the elements of the.
Some and then some don't, and then some just say no information given.
Some of the wording is like that because some of the offenses are from out of state, and another out of state, they're worded differently. We have to actually look at the out of state laws and we classify them to figure out, you know, what category you're fitting into.
So just knowing that I can call, that makes the better. I didn't know if I could get more information.
Did you want the number you said?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Moving on, offenders have a right to be free from vigilantism. Okay, they have a right to live, you know, freely in the community just like you and I. Pretty much they've done their time. So they should be able to live and not be harassed or have their property damaged. Okay, I'm going to skip over this one here.
Can you just go back to that screen and
Sure, go ahead.
clarify? So did you say that living next to daycare, if they're on supervision, that's not okay?
Yes.
Living next to school, if they're on supervision, that's not okay?
Yes.
And what's the distance between for the school? Does it matter?
There is no distance.
There's no distance?
What I've heard from, I've heard a distance from DLC, but I've heard 2 different ones, so I'm not sure.
And then
I've heard 3 blocks, I've heard 7 blocks, so I'm not sure. But the main thing is if it's fairly close, they're not going to allow it.
So on supervision is not the same thing as probation?
Yes, it is. It's the same.
Is it different than the check every 90 days?
What do you mean, check every 9 days?
Means monitoring.
The monitoring every 90 days?
No. That's what we do.
Is that different than on
Yes.
supervision?
Yes. Yeah, pretty much with your DLC supervision is where they have to check in with their CCO, which is the Community Correction Officer. They'll go down to the office at 4th Avenue and they'll go to the kiosks and show they were there, or they'll actually meet with their DLC CCO. Since you're talking about that, pretty much what we do is our address verifications. With our level 1 sex offenders, we check on them. You're messing me up because I'm going out, but I'll go in. Pretty much, there's a, let me just go to it. Anybody know who this guy is? Have you ever seen him before? Or heard his name? Terrapon Adhan? Okay. Because of him, well, who he is, he's a level 1 sex offender, low risk, living in Pierce County. He was out of compliance with the sex offender registration law. I believe it was Pierce County or Thurston, but I think it was Pierce County. They didn't know where he was living at. The county sheriffs, I don't think they always went out and verified offenders in person. Sometimes they would send letters to do their verification. In Seattle, we would always go out and check on them in person, or we would do a phone call because they were level 1s. So what happened because of Adhan, we can credit him for this, that they're getting a little bit more attention. The level 1 sex offenders, the county, the Washington chiefs and the sheriffs, they created a grant so the county sheriffs could go out once a year and check on level 1 offenders in person. So now they're getting on-hand contact once a year by King County sheriffs or whatever county sheriffs to the area they're living in. In Seattle, what we do is we also check on them in person or over the phone. So the way I do it, now Detective Stevens may do a little bit different, the way I do it is this. When a level 1 offender moves into the Seattle area, in my area, I go off the right of way. And I know he goes off the right of way also in that aspect of it. And I'll verify that he or she is living there. King County will end up coming behind me, and they'll do their annual check. And we have a fender watcher. Fender watcher is where it's a nationwide. We go on to fender watch, and I enter my verification. And then when they verify, they see that, okay, well, check the field's verified. Okay, but they put theirs in. Then what I do is when his name comes up again, I look and see when King County checked, and I go 6 months out from that time. So then what happens is he's being checked on twice a year. Every 6 months, a level 1 offender is being checked on twice. And the reason we check on level 1 offenders also is because if a level 1 offender reoffends, who do you think they're going to contact? What agency? They're going to contact Seattle Police Department. They're not going to contact King County Sheriffs. So if Ann Hahn was living in our community and he reoffended against some little girl or some little boy, they're going to contact Seattle Police Department and say, excuse me, when was the last time you guys checked on this guy? Did you know that he was missing? Did you guys know he was living with a little girl? They're going to contact us. They're not going to contact the county sheriff's office because he's living in Seattle. So our sergeant said that she wanted us, not she, but our other sergeant. My other sergeant is retiring. She's retiring. We're having a retirement party tomorrow, so it's not Sergeant Welch. But she said she wanted us to check on the offenders also every 6 months. 6 months after the King County checked on them, because they're going to come to us. They're not going to go to King County. So the level 1 offenders are actually getting checked on twice a year. They get more attention than they're getting the same attention as level 2 offenders. Now your level 2 offenders, which is moderate risk, we check on them every 6 months in person. Okay? Your level 3 offenders, we check on them every 90 days in person. So that's the 90 days you're talking about. So if you have a level 3 sex offender living right next door to you, and if you live in West Sea, what do you live at?
Berrien,
oh, because you guys are out.
but it's White Center, Berrien-ish,
Okay.
right by Shore Elementary.
Okay, so they could go Berrien, would that be a school?
Depends on what part. Yeah, not Burien, but White Center, depends on what part. There's
What
certain
side?
parts of White Center.
Yeah. So if you have a level 3 living next door to you, and you're living in Seattle, you may see me coming there every 3 months. Why is that guy always coming over here? You're going to see the city car, but you may not know I'm a detective because I'm wearing a black jacket, but I don't have all the police insignias and everything out. You know, so you'll see someone coming, it's because I'm checking on them every 3 months. And that's just the law enforcement portion of it. But DOC, usually with DOC, when they come out there, they have DOC on their jackets. And so you know who they are. And they're actually going in the house, and they're actually searching their house, making sure that there's no contraband or anything in there. Since I'm talking about that also, when we do address verifications, our responsibility is just to verify that they're living there. We're not going into the house to see that if they have any contraband in there, if they have anything illegal in there, because that's not our responsibility. Just make sure that they live there. If they invite us in and they have cocaine on the table, stupid, dummy, well, they're going to jail. But that's all we do is just make sure that they're living there. Okay? Yeah.
What good is checking on them every 6 months? I mean, really, what does it accomplish other than that you really what is that?
Well, what it is so the community knows where they're living at. And so we know where they're living at. If a crime was to occur in that area, we're going to look at the sex offenders that living there. We're going to look at the crime that occurred and see if it fits anybody's MO. Is what we're going to do. So the main thing is so we know where they're living at. That if there's any incidents within that area. With the level 2 and level 3 offenders, the reason we check on them every 6 months and every 3 months is so the community, we know that they're living there, so the community knows that they're still living there.
So it's more for the community then?
Yeah.
So you can check on them one day, they can move the next day, and you won't know for
That
6
happens.
months that they
No.
live.
That happens all the time. They move all the time. What happens is though, community members are calling in. And they'll say, hey, and I got an example for you right now. So-and-so's not living anymore. Sometimes it's good information, sometimes it's bad information. Matter of fact, 2 weeks, let's say maybe a month ago, we received a report, someone sent a message to Offender Watch and said that Brian Drinkard lives in one of the neighborhoods, kind of familiar. What was your address in the area you were in? 31st Avenue Southwest?
Right.
Okay, Brian Drinkard lives up in his neighborhood. But it was somebody in the neighborhood that actually contacted Offender Watch and said that Brian Drinkard is level 3 sex offender and he has moved out. He's in California. Well, like I said, I just took over this area 2 months ago. I checked on Brian Drinker 2 months ago, so I knew he was there. But we respond to all the complaints and try and verify if they're there or not. So, matter of fact, last week I was up in West Seattle, and I was driving around, so I'm going to go by Brian's place. I roll up, Brian's on the porch with another guy, and there were a couple of females there, and they're sitting there talking. I look up, I said, Brian! He said, yeah. I said, come here. He comes down and talks to me and says, hey, just making sure you're still here, man. I said, yeah, you just checked on me. I said, yeah, I know. I said, but I got a complaint that you had moved out. I didn't give the name or anything because it was anonymous, but I let him know, I said, hey, just want you to know the community is watching. And if you move out and they don't see you, they're going to report it. So good example of that is, like I said, the report came in and we went out and checked to see if he was there. So the community is watching. They know what offenders are living within their neighborhoods. But that, the situation you said, that could happen with the level 1, where we checked on him and he moved out the next day. Okay, that could happen. It doesn't happen often, but it could happen. Okay, yeah, real quick.
Sorry, and is that just, I have to ask you this because we don't have names. Does King County, do they do have the same, does everyone in Washington have the same level 2 check every 6
Yes, they
months?
do. Yeah, that's pretty much state law.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody checks on level 3s, 99 days, every 6 months for level 2s. And with the level 1s, King County, they just do the 1 check. The only reason they level 1s in Seattle get checked on twice because they're living in Seattle. And King County also checks on that. That's the only reason. So when I told a offender in a minute, I said, well, you don't like being checked on twice? Move out of Seattle. You know. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. Okay. Where we left off at before we deviated was the vigilantism. I'm not going to really go into it, but the main thing is that we don't want to cause any vigilantism. We don't want that to happen. You had the Gallardo case years ago where he was getting out of prison and the community knew about it, the notifications took place. But what the community did is they burnt his house down. And so then he had nowhere to stay. They couldn't prove that it was a vigilantism situation, even though you know it was. But they didn't know who did it. Okay. The next one, real quickly, is you probably might remember the woman that beat the guy with the bat. Okay, well, pretty much what this one was is the guy got out of prison. He did what he was supposed to. He registered with the sheriff's office. The sheriff's office put out the bullet, level 3 sex offender, living in my neighborhood. Tammy Gibson saw it. And she said, that knucklehead was talking to my daughter the other day. So she goes out with her bat. When she sees him, she beats him. Please come, please arrest her for assault. Because she's beating him with a bat. She goes to jail. She actually pleads guilty to assault and for beating the level 3 sex offender. She did her time. It was an unprovoked attack. But what happened to the sex offender was, he did what he was supposed to do, but he registered his address at the wrong location. So he's living here at this address, but he registered over here. So he ended up getting arrested and then going to jail and then doing time for failure to register as a sex offender. That was his responsibility to put the right address on there. So he did what he was supposed to. The notification went out, law enforcement did what they were supposed to, but he put the wrong address down, so he went to jail. You know, so both of them went to jail. But I guess you could say that was kind of an act of vigilantism. You know, she beat him with a bat. The other one is something that you really like to see is the washerman accused of killing sex offenders allegedly leaks milk. It had to be done. This was on June 5th, 2012. Killing of 2 Bellingham sex offenders may have been a vigilante, police said. Last Friday night, a man claiming to be an FBI agent dropped in on level 3 sex offenders living together, supposedly to warn them that they were on a sex offender list. Well, when this allegedly FBI agent arrived, there were 3 sex offenders there. While he was there explaining to him that you're on this list, one sex offender, I have to leave, I have to go to work. So he left. When he came back home from work, he found his roommates dead. And the guy, Mr. Mullins, actually turned himself in, saying that he killed them. One of the disturbing problems is Mr. Mullins actually got their actual address from the sheriff's website. And see, they actually had the actual address, 2425 South Delridge Way or whatever, on the website. We shouldn't have it. They should have just had the 2400 block of Derrickwood Southwest, and that would have been it. But they actually had the address, and that's how he sought them out. And he killed them. So he's in prison right now. But I can say I haven't really heard of any situations in Seattle. Okay, yeah.
Did the sheriff department change their address policy?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
Yes, they did. Yeah. So again, here's just stuff on the level ones. Again, I'm not going to really go over that. I'll just read really quickly through it. They're low risk, of course. They have not exhibited predatory types of characteristics. They have successfully participated in or participating in approved sex offender treatment programs, and usually they're first-time offenders. That's your level 1, your low risk. Your level 2 offenders, they're moderate risk to reoffend. They're level 2 because of the nature of the crime. For some sex offenders, because of the lifestyle that they live, they take drugs, they take alcohol, and sometimes it may influence them to reoffend. So there's sometimes they're level 2s. Often they have more than one victim, and they took advantage of their victim because of their position of trust. You've got teacher, coach, pastor, preacher, police officers, firefighters, anybody in position of authority and trust. Just a good example, everybody's heard of Mary Kay Letourneau. If Mary Kay Letourneau had sex with her roommate, well, her classmate, okay, a juvenile, a student, my fault. And that was her first crime. So now when she got found guilty, what level do you think she should be? At least a 2. She says a 3. Probably a lot of other people think she should get 3 too. She's a level 2 automatically because she was in a position of authority and trust. So even though that was her only crime, only conviction, because she was in a position of authority and trust, she's a level 2 right off the bat, right away. If it had not been a student, and it was, let's say for instance, maybe one of her kids, she probably would have been level 1, low risk. But it was because she was in an authoritative position that she was level 2. Okay, so your level 3, pretty much everybody gets a copy of the bulletin. Highly likely to reoffend. They pose a high risk to the community. They have prior sex convictions and other convictions. They're predatory. They probably use violence with their sex crimes. They probably refused to go be involved in sexual treatment. So those are your level 3s. They're very high risk. Okay. Pretty much community notification, we've talked about that. Pretty much in Seattle, what we do is when a level, it used to be that we would send out the bulletins to all the block watch captains and they would distribute them. Because of the internet, everything's on the internet. What we do is if a level 3 sex offender lives within our community, what we'll do is we send an email to the precinct captain, the CAU detective, and also the crime prevention coordinator. And then that's how you all find out about it. And that's how you guys found out about Nicholas Beavers. And the other individual, Cosmo, who's been living in the community for quite a while. Anybody seen the name Cosmo? He actually lives in the Luna district. Luna Park? Luna Park. That's where he lives at. Cosmo, before he moved over here, he was living over in my area in the south end of Seattle. And I don't know what happened, but for some reason he left over there and he moved over here. I don't know if the people he was staying with didn't want the attention, but he moved over here. He's been over here since. I haven't had any problems with him. But I know he did have a failure to register a case that Detective Stevenson actually filed on him. But I checked on him, I think it was last month, and he is in fact still there. Okay, let's go ahead and kind of wrap this up. We talked about him. So pretty much when they're released from prison, they have 3 days to register with the county sheriff's office of where they're going to live at. If they have a fixed address where they're living at, once they register there, the detectives come out and check on them and make sure that they're living there. If they're not there, we'll do a failure to register case against them. They don't have to change their address again until they move. Okay, if they don't have a fixed address and they're homeless, they can register as a homeless sex offender. All they have to do is they have to sign in weekly at the county sheriff's office downtown. And what they have now is they have a new form that you take with you, and you actually have to write on there every day when you stay there, every night. And the county sheriffs actually review that and see where they're living at. Because they cannot, if you're homeless, if I'm a homeless sex offender, and this is my mom, I can't live with mom for a whole week and say I'm homeless. Well, if I'm homeless and this is my mom, I can live with her for 2 days. And then I can come over and stay with my aunt for another 2 days. Then I can come stay with my uncle for another 2 days. Well, that's showing me homeless. What I'm doing is I'm couch surfing. So I'm still homeless. But I can't stay with mom all week long. Well, that's my fixed address. So what they would have to write on there that I stayed with my mom, I stayed with my aunt, I stayed with my uncle. And then if we wanted to verify the information, we could go there and find out if that's where they were staying. Okay? So if you're homeless, they still have to register. A lot of sex offenders cannot find housing, so there are a lot of transitional housing out there. Now, in your neighborhood, you may see where there's maybe 4, 5, 6 sex offenders living in one place, and there's a possibility that's probably some type of a transitional housing. I only know of one over here in West Seattle. Tony, you know of any other besides that one?
Transitional housing?
Yeah. Okay. And I don't, the one I'm talking about, I don't know if it's actually transitional housing, but it's a house where about at least 4 to 5 sex offenders actually live at. Okay, and a lot of times that's a kind of a help when they all live together because they kind of police one another because they don't want the attention. You know, so they know we're coming to check on them, they know county's coming to check on them, and so you'll have like 1, 2, and 3 all living in the house, but they're policing one another. And I actually have a situation. The Raymond address out in the south end of Seattle is a transitional house. And well, it's not really a transitional house. It's a house, but you have 6 sex offenders living there. And we had one guy that actually, 2 of them went out on the outing, and when they were coming back, one of them saw a magazine. It was a porno magazine. The guy picks it up and he puts it in his pocket. And while he's walking home, he also makes contact with a little girl. He says, "Hi, how you doing?" Well, the first thing the other offender did is he calls me and tells me what happened. I said, "Well, you need to contact DOC and let them know." So he contacted the DOC officer, and the guy was violated right away because he violated his probation. Okay, so they police one another because they don't want the attention coming on them. Okay, so that's one good thing about that. But you do have a lot of transition housing because they can't find housing. The offenders that are on DOC supervision, usually when they come out of prison, they're on there for 2 to 3 years or life. You know, so if they've done all the time in prison and they're not on supervision, pretty much when they get out, they can live wherever they want. There's no restrictions against them. Okay, so I talked about the daycare and the school exams, so we'll go past that. Address and care verification, we talked about that. Here's what we check on them. If they're not there, we do the failure records case. Okay, pretty much like I said, community involvement. You guys are our eyes and our ears. You live in the community, so we need your help. Whatever you see, let us know. Just a few examples. Joseph Key. Joseph Key was a high-risk level 3 sex offender. If there was another level, he would have been it. Joseph Key was actually housed at the Civil Commitment Center here in Seattle on Spokane Street for probably about 2 years. Then he was released to the community. While he was in the community, he was living in South end Seattle. I had no problems with him. Pretty much we had the community watching him, law enforcement was watching him, and the DOC was watching him. He actually had a GPS device on his ankle, so they knew where he was going all the time. One thing that worked good was with the community. The community said, "Hey, kids catch the bus in front of his house at such and such time." Well, Joseph Key was gone to work at about 4:30 in the morning. So he was away from the house when the kids caught the bus. And when they came home from school, he was not at the house. When he got off work, he would go to the library, way out in Bellevue, or he would go shopping or something, or he'd go to therapy. Then he would come home probably about 7 or 8 o'clock at night. So while he was in the south end of Seattle, I never had a problem with him. There were never no reports of him reoffending. He is now off supervision with DOC, and he's living in the eastern Washington somewhere, where his family's at. You know, so we're glad. You know, he's out of south end of Seattle, out of Seattle. Brian Drinker, I already told you about him. I told you about the daycare example in the school. Rodney Green, again, where the community can really help us. Rodney Green is a level 2 sex offender. What happened with him was He was registered in the East Precinct area of 24th Avenue East. A new family moved into the community, and they believe in the websites. She's on the website, she's looking at offenders that are living in her neighborhood. She sees Rodney Green's name, level 2 sex offender, and he lives at such and such address. So she's like, well, I haven't seen him. So what she does, she goes around and talks to her neighbors that have lived there for a while and says, excuse me, I see this sex offender, they're supposed to be living at this address, but I haven't seen him. Well, the neighbor says, well, he's not there. His family lives there, but I haven't seen him in years. So what happens is, she contacts John Urquhart with the King County Sheriff's Office. He was over the media relations at that time. I believe he was the spokesperson. He sends it to the King County Sheriff's Sex Offender Unit. They again pass the buck and send it to us. And so I get the case and I start to investigate. And I should, because it was in our area. I actually went out to the house. I talked to Mr. Green Sr. He was from the state detective. Rodney Green lives in Florida. He hasn't lived here at least a couple years. So really? He gives me his phone number. And this is a Friday night, a Friday afternoon. I go back to the office, I call him, and I leave a voice message. Say, Rodney, this detective field, Seattle Police Sex Offender Unit. I'm just doing address verification. I see that you're supposed to be living at this address. Your dad says you live in Florida. You need to change your address. He calls me back that night and says, Detective, I live with my family. I'll see you Monday. I'll see you Monday morning. So I come to work Monday morning, I hear this voice message. Well, sure enough, probably about 11 o'clock noon, Rodney Green shows up at my doorstep. Well, I already knew he was living in Florida and he wasn't in Seattle. So pretty much what I did is I arrested him, put him in jail, started the case up on him. He was charged. He was convicted of failure to register as a sex offender. He did his time in prison, and Rodney hasn't left the city yet. He's actually doing pretty good. But because of the help of the community, because somebody saw a suspicious circumstance, this guy's not living in this neighborhood, and sent an email to the county sheriffs or to the Seattle Police Department, this guy was arrested and put in jail. So you guys are our eyes and our ears. So you have to help us out, okay? We don't live in the communities. We actually work in the community and help out. So I don't live in West Seattle. I used to go to church down the street in West Seattle, but I don't live in West Seattle, so you guys have to help me since this is my area. And same with the other areas. If you know individuals that live in the north end of Seattle or south end of Seattle, let them know that they are the eyes and the ears of the community, and they have to help the police department out. Okay? Real quickly, I'm not going to ask, I'll ask you. Well, I'll just go to the numbers. I'm not going to go through all that. The number of sex offenders that actually live within Washington is 20,341. The number of sex offenders that are actually registered in King County is 3,485. Number of sex offenders registered in Seattle is 1,154. Your level 1 offenders that live in Seattle is 795. And again, look at that number. It's pretty high. Those are all level 1 offenders. There's no notification on these guys. They could be living next door to you. So that's where you need to know who your neighbors are. Okay? Because they could be living next door to you. You need to watch their activities. See if there's any suspicious activity. And if they're doing anything that you think is suspicious, call us. If you know the name, ask us. But let's just not go on a fishing expedition because, we're not going to give you the information. But there's a lot of level 1 sex offenders living within the community. Level 2 sex offenders in Seattle, 198. 161 level 3s. Homeless sex offenders living within King County is 403. So there's a lot of homeless sex offenders living within Seattle that could be sleeping in your backyard. Could be sleeping in the park right next to your house. But there's a lot of homeless sex offenders in Seattle, yes.
So honestly, 403 people come in to that window down in King County every single day?
Well, they have that whole week to do
A
it.
week, so.
Yeah, Monday through Friday.
7 or 5.
Yes. So yes, it is. Just
I
to
have
kind
a question.
Yes.
How many of the level 3 offenders in Seattle, 161, live in West Seattle?
We're going to get to that right here. We'll break all that down. How about that? South of Seattle has 159 level 1s. They have 46 level 2s and 55 level 3s, with a total of 260. And I will tell you this, West Seattle actually has kind of like the lowest numbers. North Precinct, 269 level 1s, level 2 is 55, level 3 is 43. East Precinct has 143 level 1s, 41 level 2s, and 34 level 3s. West Precinct, which would be the downtown area, Queen Anne and Magnolia area, there are 122 level 1s, 36 level 2s, and 14 level 3s. Southwest, 102 level 1s, 20 level 2s, and 15 level 3s. And in the West Seattle area, you have two districts. You actually have your Williams sector and you have Frank sector. And I believe in the Williams sector, which is more up in the Luna Park, the 35th Avenue Way, the Dare Ridge Way, I think it was a 5 or 7.
Map is right there.
Yes.
7.
Seven west of,
It looks like Frank is more south.
west of Georgetown and south.
Yeah, so there were 7 level 3s just in the Williams sector area. Okay, so that would be more or less up in the west side, up in this area up here. And then in the Frank sector area, it was 15, so there was, what, 8, 8 that are on this side. So actually West Seattle actually has low numbers. In the area up there at 35th Avenue, actually there's two level 3s that actually live in the 35th Avenue, Southwest and Admiral District. And that's Cosmo, who actually lives in Luna Park area, and then Nicholas Beavers, who lives off of California Avenue Southwest. Okay. So those are the numbers. And pretty much real quickly, maybe 5-10 minutes.
It's not even that.
Okay, Texas even just going to come up and talk about just some safety tips, for kids within the community and so forth, and then we'll just take your questions.
So just real briefly, since the other presentation went pretty long, just to hammer home, we handed out these handouts. They're pretty simple, but just being a parent myself of a 4-year-old, main thing is most of these sex offenses are committed by somebody you know, not necessarily a stranger. The stranger incidents are pretty rare. Just be aware of what your kid's doing, what their surroundings are, where they're playing at. Keep your eye on them. Make sure age appropriate. Just pay attention to, if they're 4 years old, they probably shouldn't be outside by themselves. If they're 7 or 8, maybe they can be. Just keep a little bit of a watchful eye on them. Just teach kids that bad guys can be anybody. Most of these guys use trickery to get at kids. They're not going to be the mean, evil person that we all picture these sex offenders. And I think the majority of this is pretty basic and pretty common sense rules to follow with your kids. But now we're going to open the floor to questions.
I don't know whether you can, I know it's in White Center, which is across through, but speak to the recent attempted abductions in White Center that are making a lot of us in West Seattle very nervous.
You really cannot talk about the case. It's not our case. It's King County Sheriff's case, and we couldn't tell you any details or what the updates on that case are or anything like that. If you have generalized questions about, safety things.
So you can't tell us, like, do they think it's the same person who tried to do what?
I don't even know. I couldn't even tell you the answer to that because I wouldn't share that with me.
Yeah, we know the same information that you know. Yeah, we don't know anything. Yeah, right back here.
Okay, so you've given us all these tips and talked about them. Can you give us any guidelines on how to actually live with them in our neighborhood? I mean, if they're bought a house, they're living there, what advice do you have for those of us that share a fence.
Yeah, do we be cordial? Do we have to? I
you have to
prefer
be
not
cordial?
to. I don't want my kids talking to them.
You don't have to be cordial. I would tell, what I would do is I would tell your kids, I would actually, if you know that they're a sex offender and they have a bulletin, I would actually show the bulletin to my son or my daughter and let them know this is a bad person. This is someone that you don't want to talk to. This is someone that you don't want to interact with.
What if he comes into my yard?
If he comes into,
My yard, like into my physical yard.
okay, so you live on a,
I live right next door to him,
okay.
so
If he comes in your property, just let him know I don't want you on my property.
I can do that?
Yeah, that's your property.
Okay.
Yeah, just I don't want you on your property. I know who you are. If he's on the internet, he's level 2 or level 3 sex offender. I know what you've done. I have kids. I don't want you around my kids, and I don't want you on my property.
So our case is that he has small kids, I have grown kids, but again, I mean, a wave hello,
That's up to you. That's up to you.
is there any benefit to being kind, or I guess I just don't know how to handle it,
I think as an adult, I think it's okay to be kind. But now for the kids, I wouldn't advise them to say hi. Hi, how you doing?
Okay.
Because he may take it the wrong way. He may think the kid is trying to come on to him, and with his warped thinking, he may try and reoffend against that kid. But as an adult, I see no problem with that. Now, if you're concerned, I wouldn't say anything, but let your husband say hi. Oh.
We're not, we're
Oh,
just
no.
neighbors.
I told you it was date night.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna go back to the white center thing. Can you give us any insider tips on who we can talk to try and get a community meeting about these events going on in our community at Tri-City West? Can you maybe call somebody and say, hey, these people are showing up in our meeting and bugging us about these events? Can you maybe like walk the sheriff's storefront? I have not, I've gone to the all, I've called the two of us and talked to her.
There's two sheriffs, yeah, but she's the media relations officer.
Okay, so yes.
There are two neighborhood storefronts in the White Center area, one on 16th and one in the Greenbridge neighborhood. Both are staffed by deputies. Go in and talk to the deputy and say that you want to meet.
Okay,
You know, that's what they're there for. That's the community presence of the sheriff's office.
Okay.
Those two deputies are, by the way, very proactive.
Yeah, BJ Myers is at
BJ is
16th
probably
and
one
Eric
of the
White
sweetest
is
guys you
there.
ever want to talk to.
And then let us all know.
Yes, please.
I mean, that's the situation, because like, where do I go from there? I guess we say a lot. Yes.
Or the email list, that's, I don't know what the purpose is of that, but it'd be nice to be included on that, and perhaps we can help you if that seems like a really daunting task, so perhaps we can help you.
Do you get the Highline Times or West Seattle Herald?
I have them all on my Twitter feed, and they're all on my Facebook.
But there's
Yeah.
usually a notice in there about the North Highline Community Act.
North Highline Unincorporated Area
That's
Council.
it.
We run the agenda as well. They meet on the third Thursday of the month. You can get on their agenda. I'll talk to you afterwards.
And they're very proactive. They're giving out all kinds of valuable information and assisting people with resolving some of these issues.
I'm sorry, I'm just worked up about it, and obviously there's just things I didn't know about, places that I can go.
I think you have to keep in mind that you're not in the city of Seattle, so your law enforcement agency is not the Seattle Police Department.
I don't know, this was the first meeting when that has come up.
But you might want to be tuned in more to the resources of the law enforcement agency in your neighborhood, because without they work together, they don't necessarily share information. That's kind of the basic, they don't necessarily share
I don't
information.
know, a lack of frustration about it.
Because it's different jurisdictions.
And I think the other to it, because it's their investigation, they don't want, us to put out information about their case, because it compromises their investigation. So yeah, like I said, we know what you guys know, what we heard on the TV. So yeah, right.
Two things, just one suggestion from the preschool my son goes to. I don't know if you guys have ever thought about having a mail distribution list to the administrations of the schools. Westdale blog is really good about putting out information, but not everybody has the time to surf the blog. So, if there is an offense, like these, Sunday evening offenses, to have an email distribution list from you guys to say, look, we had a real problem last night, be on high alert. Just a suggestion, I don't know if you ever thought of that. So.
I know King County, they have that mass phone distribution over there, things that are.
You have to sign, if you're talking about sex offenders in particular, yes, you can sign for email notification.
You're talking about more
That's not, that's
But
not.
I think the police.
You're talking about crime notifications.
Yeah,
crime that
yes,
just happened.
yes, I'm talking just.
You can always go to crimereports.com.
I'm talking about a pushing of information
To preschools.
to the leaders. I'm talking about a pushing of information to the leaders. Anyways, just a suggestion. Number two would be do you think that there is an acceleration of underground activity with kidnapping going on in the Pacific Northwest? It's just, I don't know, some of these things just seem.
I don't. These 2 years, the most recent I've heard about. Now you hear luring situations all the time where a car drives up and the guy tells the girl to tell him they run, or they try and lure him into the car. That's about it. I haven't really heard that many in Seattle. It seems like you hear them from the outer areas, but not actually in Seattle. I'm sorry, can you think of any that have come across your desk?
And just to add to that, not to make light of it at all, but there is a lot more media attention when something like that happens.
Sure.
So you hear a lot about it, you're getting a lot of information all at once, and they're very few and far between the actual incidents.
Thank you.
I got a question and comment. One, we do a lot of electronic dialogue with our block watch. Is this information available on the state department's website that I pulled out as a PDF?
I don't think we have any.
I can scan these.
You can scan that, do that, yeah. We don't have them online.
I can tell you that we can scan them and put them on the block watch website.
That'd be great. That'd be really nice.
Yeah.
You know, comment is, we talk about going over boundaries. There's a couple of really good smartphone apps. I've got one on my phone that shows all the sexual level 2, level 3s, pictures, crime, and it spans both King County and Seattle, so it goes right across Roxbury and all that. And it's a nice little tool. I got a 15-year-old daughter, I've got the on her phone, it's got a panic button, she can hit, and it'll immediately, I need help kind of thing. But most important, the one guy who did West Seattle, he shows up. There's 2 on Apple down there that shows. So, yeah, it's really kind of a nice little tool.
Yeah, because pretty much the WASPIC website, it does the same. It pretty much shows all the sex offenders in Washington, is what it does.
The difference with the apps you're talking about, those are generally put out by private companies, and their information is not as up to date as what you're going to get off the actual King County Sheriff's website or the state of Washington website.
So 2 things, there's a Seattle Preschool Association that could start an email list, and our preschool lady, she was about that. And also, what are you doing to, get him back into, the one in our neighborhood is so young. What kind of help is there for getting him in a positive direction? I don't want to look at him that he's evil, but I saw him at the grocery store and I felt sad that he's so young. And what are you doing to get him,
Well, I can say,
is there an organization that does something to get him in a positive direction?
Sure,
And watch
We
it
used
be
to call
crazy
those
about?
families.
What about the required therapy? Is it required therapy? These people are.
Well, see, that would be if when he was going through his, when he was on DOC supervision or JRA, which is Juvenile Rehabilitation Administration, when he was under, that's probably when he would have gone through his treatment, because his prime privilege was juvenile.
But in the level 3, it says will not respond to treatment.
Some of them,
So,
it's not everybody, some of them don't, some of them.
okay.
So I don't recall if he did or not.
But it's sad to me.
It is.
I understand what you're saying.
I mean, is there,
He is still an adult, and yet he makes his own choices, unfortunately.
yeah, it's just really sad sad that something.
I will say one, I was like I said, I've only taken over here 2 months ago, but I did meet with him and I talked with him. And I know he's working, and I know he's.
He's not working with children.
No.
He's not working in the neighborhood?
No.
Okay.
He's not even working up West Seattle, no.
And I can tell you, we take it upon ourselves, if we find something like that, where,
Well, he
you know,
does
somehow
live by 3 preschools, a high
we
school.
can't do
that-
anything about that, but if we catch word that they're working amongst children, we make sure that that
I just-
organization that
I
they're
just,
working.
I don't wanna, you know, I just feel like I don't wanna be hateful, but I wanna know that you are trying to push him in some sort of positive direction. You know, or somebody is.
Well, see, all we do is add
What,
the.
is he, do you know if he's living with family?
He's actually, he's not living with family, he's living with friends. Is what he's living with. Like I said, I know he's working, I know he's going to school, so he's doing something positive.
Okay,
So he's just not just living off the state.
okay.
So he's trying to do something. And I know he understands his crime was when he was a juvenile, and because his crime was as a juvenile, he can get off. Okay, the thing is really take advantage of that process and do it.
Can you tell us at least level 3, because I remember looking at it, his kind of bio. I know he was in a position of trust, but also he violated his address agreement.
Yeah, very
And is that, are those the criteria for level 3?
Well, you have
Yeah,
to.
yeah, that wasn't on that, but they do consider that, and if somebody has a number of failure to registers, yes, they can get raised up to a higher level, or even other offenses, you know, for instance, they got commit a serious assault, well, they may be bumped up to a higher level just because of that.
And there was another thing that you just sort of mentioned about a measure that's going to be coming through your voting to help for funds, that if these particular funds get cut, then,
Oh, yeah,
can you
that's,
tell me what that is?
well, yeah, that's been on the news all the
Oh,
government
yeah.
budget, that if it doesn't pass, that the supervised by the DOC Department of Corrections, that was cut. Because the DOC officers, I believe they were losing their job.
With all the 6 month, 9,
Hmm?
all the supervisions you were talking about would be kept.
Yes,
They already got their
And what's this?
they did.
They got
Okay.
them. All the CCOs that.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that. I knew that somebody, I knew that those that are in Western State, I know they can receive their notices, I didn't know that, the DOC. So pretty much what happened there, if the budget doesn't pass, pretty much that's not the more work on us. We'll continue doing what we're doing, but pretty much is, we're gonna have to, when we go out and make contact, we're gonna have to talk to them and find out what's going on. Because contrary to what some people believe, they feel, oh, all you're doing is making sure they're living there. But I've talked to offenders, they've actually told me where it really helps them, because they know that I'm coming. And so they say it's kind of like a checks and balance for them. When Detective Fields is coming, I've had offenders tell me, say, Detective, man, I haven't gone back to jail. I've been out for so long. You know, and another thing is too is, how many of you socialize with sex offenders? How many of you go out to dinner with sex offenders? Not too many people. So when we come and we go to verify these guys, it's like we're their only friends. It's kind of like, so they want to sit there and they want to talk to you. You know, sometimes we got to pry ourselves away and say, man, I got to go, man, I have work to check on. But sometimes we're the only ones who talk, especially when people know that they're level 3 sex offenders, they've offended against children. And we're talking with them, we're going for one, we have to verify them. And the other thing is we don't want anybody else being victimized, so we're trying to encourage them to do the right thing, keep a job, keep housing, you know, and so forth. But if the budget doesn't pass, yeah, that's going to put a lot more work on us. Because for one, your level 3 sex offenders, they're not going to be running GPS devices. So they can go do something and nobody's tracking. You see, so it's going to put a lot more work on us, so hopefully everything passes. But yeah. Yes?
In a residential neighborhood, if a sex offender buys a house, is he allowed to rent different rooms to more sex offenders? Or is that a violation of zoning, or is that a violation of his release from children prison?
I'm not real familiar with zoning laws, but I'm pretty sure they can do whatever you can do as far as subletting their house. And that has happened in a number of situations. I've talked about a few houses just like that where
Yeah, there's a guy right now, he's not a sex offender. He actually owns 3 houses, 2 in the Rainier Valley and one in the Central District, 23rd and Columbia. And he rents out the rooms in the houses, and he's charging $500-something a month. You know, so he's making pretty good money. And in the smallest house, I think he has 2, 4. He has at least about 7 in the smallest house, and that's the one in the Central District. And then the other one in the Central District, he had what? There's at least 6 in that one. That's another. It's a little bigger than the other ones. There's upstairs and downstairs. The one down in the Rainier Valley area, he has. I think there's 7 in that one.
Renting specifically, privately renting specifically.
Not just sex for him, he feels he has a calling pretty much to help individuals be released from prison. So his isn't just sex offenders, it's just those on DLC. But right now it is on sex offenders.
I think the reason it works out like that is because sex offenders have a very hard time finding a place to live, so they're the first ones to jump in.
Yeah, right over here.
Okay, well, I'm gonna come back to our resident one. So it looks like he may have been released 4 or 5 years ago. He's employed, he bought a house. So I would take those as positive signs, right? I guess, how would you notice a bad sign? Like his yard starts growing up, or I mean, what would be a factor?
That could be a sign. Yeah.
I mean, can they rehabilitate, I guess? Can they go 10 years and be on the straight and narrow and then reoffend right away? Or I'm just looking for something so I'm not so angry.
Well, I'll tell you what I tell people all the time is this: a sex offender is like an alcoholic. An alcoholic, if he or she takes one drink, they're alcoholic. With a sex offender, I don't have no study or anything on this. This is my belief. A sex offender, if he walks that straight and narrow path and sticks with his or her treatment, they're going to do good. Now, once they deviate from that, they start looking at this little girl over here, or looking at this little guy over here, deviate from what their treatment was, they're going back into their cycle. So pretty much once a sex offender, always a sex offender. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. That's my beliefs. But like I said, I don't have any study or anything on that, but that's what I believe.
Yeah, and he apparently is offended just against people he's been in a relationship with, and he's relatively young, kind of, I think what you were saying, and the crimes were committed within the last, he was 21, 22, something like that, it looks like, from your site. So I guess I just kind of think if you're making progress, you're going forward.
And that's your neighbor?
Yeah.
And how long has he lived there?
A week.
Oh, I already know who he is.
Yeah. We all know who he is.
But we're not Seattle.
Would it be a level 3?
Yes.
Does he have a wife?
Not
No.
yet.
But I don't even think his
Well,
fiancé
is there a woman living with him?
Yes.
right now. Yeah.
Okay, and are there some other guys living with him?
Well,
Not yet.
we heard that.
Okay, but they're moving in.
I saw the moving van this week, and
I know exactly who he is. He used to live, matter of fact, right here in West Seattle, off of Fonterey.
Yep.
Yeah,
They did. They both did.
Did they get run out, or?
Well, you mean, when you say both, you mean him and the female?
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the people that are moving in with him, do you know them?
The management didn't put him out before they actually left. There was some pressure for them to move on. But what happened was they were actually looking for this house when I went out to talk to them. And so they were happy that they actually got the house. They were just waiting for everything to close.
So we heard.
Huh?
So we heard.
And actually, we actually have a detective that actually lives in that neighborhood.
So they've seen you come over to visit?
No.
He's not a detective, he's a police.
Oh, yeah.
There's a detective lives in the neighborhood, but not on that block, but maybe around the corner.
No, he lives
Okay.
on our block.
Huh?
He lives
Probably
5
somebody
doors
else
down.
we're talking about.
Yeah.
We're talking about this.
So you're familiar with our neighbor?
Yes. And just to give you,
He wasn't up
just
there.
so you feel good, talking with him and his, I thought it was his wife, but the woman that he's staying with, it seems like he's doing good. He's working. He's doing positive things. And I believe his crime was a while ago. Yeah, it was a while ago. It wasn't recent. But he is level 3. I know he wants to get lower down to a level 2.
Can you get lower?
Yes, you can.
How can you get lower?
Yeah, how does that happen?
There's a process. They actually have to make a formal request to whoever's monitoring them, which would be us, they're in our area. And we actually use an actuary tool to score them down, the same actuary tool that is used when they get out of prison. And score them to see if they're still at the same score they were when they got out of prison, any contributing factors, what if they've done to reoffend, so on and so forth. And then we make a recommendation based on that as to whether they should be lowered or whether they should stay the same. Should say most of them stay exactly the same.
So do you talk to different jurisdictions if there's somebody in West Seattle that maybe hasn't been convicted, but crime has been reported? Would you, again, they came from Eastern Washington, do you investigate, do you look over different jurisdictions?
So you're asking if we
I'm asking
actually
about
review their,
investigating
when they come to our
crimes.
jurisdiction, if we actually review the crimes that they did before they came here? Yes, we do. We actually order up all the reports and look at their history and everything else. So
Statewide or?
Nationwide, yeah, nationwide. We order people from all over the world, or all over the country that move here, to review their case files.
See, because what happens is when an offender, let's say for instance, an offender moves in, comes to Seattle, and they used to live in California. So we don't know anything about them. So Michelle actually orders their file material, for one, so we can score them out, see if we agree with what their scoring is. And then also, if we decide that we have to fail to register a case against him because he's not living where he's supposed to, we need all that paperwork for the prosecutor's office. We'll need their judgment and sentence from California, so yeah, we need all that paperwork, so we try and get as much of it as possible. Sometimes it's not available, but we try and get as much as we can.
If someone's under the DOC of California, can they transfer up here and come into the DOC here? Or are they have to stay in California to finish up the DOC?
They can. They can. They call it an inner compact. And they can, but they have to go through so much paperwork to get transferred up to Seattle. It takes a while, but yeah, it's called an interstate compact. Question right here?
Is it just the two of you, basically?
Right now it is.
Seattle?
Yes.
So of the 1154 individuals that have been identified, and the 359 of the twos and threes, it's just you two?
It's just us two.
So you guys have to drive around every day?
Yes.
Right now, they
Or-
don't have time to do that.
Or in one of the offices doing a case.
And
Or somebody else.
Pardon me?
I mean, not just having people, you've got people out there that have never been.
Our unit, we only deal with the registered offenders.
So you don't do detective work as far as?
No.
There's
We
like
both
sexual
have backgrounds in
assault,
that,
something,
but no,
or-
we don't do that.
No, we actually have, how many, there are 12 or 11 detectives that actually do the investigation on a different case? There's actually 11 detectives that actually within the unit, then all they do is focus on is child abuse cases, sexual assaults on adults, and then all we do is deal with sex offenders and kidnapping, and that's it. And so if anything needs to be investigated on them for failure to register, that's what we do.
And we work closely with them, because a lot of times our information helps solve their cases.